Hey everybody, welcome back to Chicken Fried Growth, where go-to-market AI and the Deep South collide. I am your host, David York, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sara Moseley.
Hey y'all.
And we are going to have some fun conversations today. So our topic or topics today are going to be twofold. The first topic, as we like to jump into initially, is a discussion about the chemistry of sweet tea in the Deep South. And if you're not from the Deep South, you're going to get a great education about sweet tea and how it varies from location to location.
Yes.
And then the second thing we're going to talk about is the way that the buyer journey and buying behaviors are changing. There's some interesting data that 6 Sense came out with towards the end of last year. I want to dive into that a little bit and talk about how AI is and isn't changing buying behaviors. And I think that's really interesting.
Yes.
So without further ado, sweet tea. I am a lover of sweet tea. In fact, I spent 3 years in North Carolina, and I think I consumed like 6 years worth of sweet tea in that time frame. I'm not going to lie. I have way too much sweet. Yeah, I had a lot. I had a lot of sweet tea, and when I moved back to Texas, I had to cut back because it was really, really good in North Carolina, better than it was in Texas, I'll say. Here's the thing about sweet tea in Texas, and this is the conversation I want to have, because your Alabama bona fides will definitely have some things to say about
We're
this.
strong opinions.
Sweet tea in Texas is not as sweet as it is in other parts of the South. Again, as we've had this conversation, Texas is kind of the South, not the Deep South. We're kind of South, Deep South adjacent.
Okay.
So our tea is not quite as sweet as it is in other places.
Okay.
And so sweet tea here it's nice. It's nice, but it doesn't have the same consistency and density, let's just say, it's not the same chemistry as sweet tea in the Deep South. And Sara, you probably have opinions and thoughts and feelings about that.
Yeah, just based on whose house you're eating at. When I was a kid, you knew whether or not they did tea right, and tea was always huge. Like, that's the one thing I have from my dad is his handwritten sweet tea recipe. Like,
really? Mm-hmm. A full recipe for it, huh?
Yes, because he would Arnold Palmer it a little bit. Like, he would add a ton of lemon, which I think is where I get my crazy affinity for lemon. So it was almost like drinking sweet tea lemonade when he made it, which I loved. Oh my God, so good. It's ridiculous, but it probably is 2,000 calories just for a cup. Like, there's so much.
Yeah. How much sugar is on that recipe for like a gallon of sweet tea?
I think it's 2.5 cups, which is just horrifying. I know, it's awful.
That is the laugh.
Why is everybody in my family fat? Why? Oh yeah. Oh my stars. Yeah. So, and then my Aunt C didn't make it that way, but she did add peach juice to it. So that she'd open up a can of peaches and pour in, some of the peach juice into.
Now, is that like peach juice in juice with no sugar added, or is that the peach juice where it's like the syrupy sugar peaches?
Full syrup and sugar added, please.
Yeah, I would have expected that, but I just wanted to confirm. My expectation was, yes, it was like syrup, like a whole bottle of simple syrup, and then the syrup from the peaches, and then a cup of sugar.
Yeah. And so she was married to my Uncle Jimmy, who was morbidly obese before anybody else in America was. Like, he was a trendsetter. But our favorite story.
He was an early adopter.
He was an early adopter. My favorite story of him is we were all at, I think it was like Easter dinner or something one time, and she brought out her beautiful lattice work pie and set it on the table for him to serve. He cut it in half, pulled up half that pie, and was going to put it on his plate. And Aunt C, who was always very elegant and lovely, goes, "Don't you dare, James. Don't you do it." And we were like, oh my God. So he put it back and cut himself a slice. But yeah, he was going to have half her pie and then screw the rest of the guests at the table.
Well, and he was working on his diabetes, morbid obesity. Yeah, it's, you know what? Hey, it happens.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so we have, and see, I knew I had to have this conversation with you because I knew that your take on sweet tea would be the real Southern version of sweet tea. So what I have found is that going from Texas, and I lived in North Carolina, and then, you know, gone through the South, is it feels like the lower you get in the South, the thicker the sweet tea is.
More syrup.
In other words, when you're in like the Florida panhandle, like that is like, it's basically like pancake syrup with a little bit of tea flavoring.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And you're like, you have to, I mean, I'm like, and here's the thing. I'm pretty much like a half and half tea guy. Like, I'm sure that is like sacrilegious in the South because you're like, what's wrong with
my ways?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's how you make it. In fact, I had half and half tea at lunch.
Right.
And I like half and half Texas sweet tea, which is still is really mild from a sweetening perspective. Yeah. We won't go that far, but yeah. But it is it's just a tiny, it's just like ever so slightly sweet. Whereas when I go down to the South, I'm like a 70-30, right? Unsweet to sweet, because I know it's going to be like this 25 to 30% is more than enough sugar for my entire glass.
Because you know my daddy's recipe with the 2.5 cups of sugar was passed down from somewhere. So
exactly.
Other people are doing that. So yeah, for sure.
Now let me ask you this, because my mother did this a lot, and of course she's from Alabama. She would make sun tea.
Yes.
And that was a thing growing up that I remember, that she would always make sun tea, where you take the tea, the water, you put it out and just let it kind of like
porch. Yeah.
Now here's what I don't understand, and you may not know this, and I definitely don't know this, but is there something like chemically different from sun tea versus just like boiled water in tea? I
don't know, because it does take about 24 hours for it in the sun to simmer, basically. We had sun tea growing up, and that was always a big deal, but it was always in the summertime.
Yeah, always. Yep.
Yeah. So I wish I had an answer for that. I don't. But
okay. I'm curious. You know, I figure as someone who puts 2.5 cups of sugar in their tea, you might have significantly more general not pea knowledge than I. But I've wondered that. I was like, my mother always made sun tea. She had like the sun tea jar.
Yeah.
You put it in there, you sit it, and it would just be sitting out there in the sun in the summertime.
Actually were able to cook an egg one time. It was so hot out on the blacktop on our street. I think it had gotten to like 112 or something like that. I mean, it was an all day affair, but yeah.
The bigger question was, did somebody eat that egg after it had been on the road?
If we could have gotten somebody to, we would have.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let me just scrape this off the bottom of my shoe and serve it up to you.
Yeah. We were able to trick people into eating dog treats and cat food every once in a while, but we didn't get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna completely tell myself now, because you brought that up, and I have to. So there was a time, and it was my cousin and I, we were at my grandparents' house, and I want to say we were probably 12 years old.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, she just when you go into the grandparents' kitchen and they've got all the goodies, and she had this little block, butcher's block cart that kind of sat over to the side, and it had like all the treats and little baskets of goodies and just kind of stuff sitting out, chips and whatnot, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
My cousin and I found a bag of cheese puffs, like a little bag of cheese puffs on that. And we were like, we were both like 13-year-old boys. We're growing. We're like eating. He was a football player, so he ate even more than I did. And so we're like, this is great. We're going in, chowing them down. And then by the time we got to the end of them, we looked at the bag and it was dog cheese puffs. We had ate the whole bag of them, the puffs, and never known.
Rage.
Yes. Pee Wee was the dog. I'm sure he was pissed. Yeah, we didn't realize it until like we were at the bottom of the bag and we were like, what brand is this?
Somebody get it again.
Like little Bow Wows, cheese puffs. I was like, oh God, And then we looked at ourselves. You looked at each other. We were like, well, I mean, they were pretty good. We didn't have any issue with the taste of them, obviously, because we kept going back and eating them.
You didn't notice it later.
We thought
trying to scratch the back of your.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't notice that we had, we just kept going back in there and just grabbing a handful, and then the next thing you know, we
hysterical.
Yeah, so the dog treat story, I couldn't pass that up because it's like a core memory in the back of my head. When my cousin Taylor and I ate the entire bag of dog treats that were cheese puffs, none shakes.
Oh, my stars out it. It's awesome.
And on that note, let's talk about some go-to-markets. So I mentioned the 6 Sense report. So every year 6 Sense does a really good job reporting, and they have some great analysts over there that really dig in deep to the data. So they have a kind of annual buying report, where they survey thousands of different executives across all different countries and industries, et cetera, et cetera. I think the 2025 report was like 4,000 executives that they did this. So it's a significant number and amount of data that they're collecting.
Well, because
what they do is they take the bench.
When it's over 2,500, it applies globally.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's very legit data.
And it's like I said, they have really good analysts and researchers over there that are putting this together. So they are. What they do is they take the benchmarks from previous years. I think they've been doing this for a handful of years.
Yeah.
And then they are comparing and contrasting that benchmark data against it. And what they're looking at is really a lot of nuances around how customers are buying technology and software. Generally, that's what they're looking at.
Right.
And they're looking at things like how long was the buying cycle.
Okay.
And they break this data up, and we can provide the link in the notes of the show.
Cool.
They break it up across the globe, different regions, and then they look at things like how many vendors was the company evaluating. So what's that number? Like, were they looking at 3? Were they looking at 5?
Right.
What's the average number there? They look at things like, did they use some of the new stuff they're asking now is like, did they use an LLM or AI as a part of that buying process?
Interesting.
They look at how many touch points that a buyer had with vendors.
That's good to know, right?
How many touch points they had with vendors that they eventually bought from,
right.
How many touch points they had with kind of all the vendors. And then they look at things like, when did they contact vendors in the cycle? So if the cycle is, I think the average is like 10 months.
Wow, that's a long cycle.
How long into the cycle did they contact a vendor? And so the data is interesting here, and we can start with this piece of data. So what they have found through the years,
right,
in their research is really kind of a benchmark around the fact that about 70% of the buying cycle, or that journey of buying,
right,
happens before any company gets contacted. So in other words, given all the data that's available,
Right.
the internet, websites, right, social proof,
Right.
other things like that, 70% of the buying process is happening kind of in a black box.
Sure.
And the software vendors that are on the other side that are being evaluated don't even know that they're being evaluated for 70% of that entire buying cycle.
Right. That's interesting because, I do feel like our consumer habits when we're at work bleed over into that. And I do that when I'm looking at making a purchase, I do all my comparison shopping. And if it's a major purchase, yeah, I do want to talk to different people and find out what their take is on stuff. But I also love to go to review sites and see what everybody else's experience is.
Yeah, and software review sites like G2 and others,
yeah, G2 is
being more relevant and more front and center, drives that, right? So you have analysts, third-party analysts, you have review sites, you have customers, people's websites,
huge,
LinkedIn. I mean, and there's a lot of communities too. Like if you're like, I'm a part of a number of different Slack communities,
right?
And people will reach out on there and say, hey, we're getting ready to go through this evaluation. What recommendations that you have? I also had just a couple months ago, I had another executive who I've known, and he is at a new company, and he just reached out to me and says, hey, I know you know a lot about technologies and these types of companies. What's your take on so-and-so? And just, we had a phone call and just talked through, like, what did I know about them? How did I, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that happening behind the scenes.
Sure.
And I guarantee you that vendor has no idea that they're being evaluated by this company.
Sure.
But yet they are. Yeah. So the 70% takes place kind of in a black box. And then at that 30% is when a customer, a potential customer then starts reaching out to the vendors.
Okay.
A couple other interesting facts to note. So, and this data really has stayed pretty much the same, is that 75 to 80% of the time, the vendor that gets contacted first is usually the vendor that is the one that wins the business.
Yeah. So someone,
which tells you
beforehand, they're just confirming it.
Exactly. They've already basically made their minds up before they even pick up the phone or submit the form or send an email. Basically, that tells you, like, their mind is 75% of the way made up by the time they even say, hey, I'm interested in your software.
Right.
So that's interesting.
How important your content is.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right. So now we'll jump into the interesting data around how AI is changing the buying cycle, because there's a lot of consternation, I would say, in the SEO world, and people thinking about, people are going to AI and asking all these questions and getting all this right. There's this whole, obviously, the SEO industry has shifted gears into talking about AEO and GEO and how we can make sure that our company is showing up on search results for LLMs and AI tools.
Yes.
Not just when I go to Google and hit a regular search. So here's the interesting fact about AI that they found, is that the use of AI in the sales process is not impacting or influencing the buying journey or that buying process really in any way.
That is huge. Say that again, because I need to digest that.
So the buying process is not being impacted, even though customers are using AI and consulting with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever as a part of their research, but it really isn't dramatically impacting the buying process. And the data that they found was that the number of touch points that a customer has with a vendor has stayed essentially the same from year to year. So it's a part of the process.
Right.
And they found that 90+% of people are using it in the process.
Right.
but the end of that last 30% of that process is really not changing or being influenced or impacted or affected by AI being a part of the evaluation.
Right, because all the hype would make you believe, oh, it's going to be a shorter cycle, and they're going to close the deal on this, but that sounds like it's not the case, and I find that very surprising.
Yeah, or that the hype would tell you that AI search is disrupting all of this stuff and it's changing the way buyers behave and all this kind of stuff. Right. There's definitely been a lot of discussion and, like I said, consternation about how AI is disrupting how buyers behave. And the reality is it could change things down the road.
Right.
But it's not having an impact yet.
Wow.
So last stat here, because we're getting close to the round trip to the grocery store time limit that I have set upon myself in most cases.
Picking up sugar.
Here's how AI is impacting the buying cycle. It's not impacting the cycle from the perspective of, oh, we're doing all this research with AI and it's changing, when and how we interact with the vendors. But what it is changing is how vendors perceive, or how customers are perceiving vendors related to their AI capabilities. So the 2025 data, so AI is impacting it, but it's not impacting it in the way you would think. It's impacting it in the way where customers are going onto vendor websites, they're looking at their site, and it's saying, oh, we do all this AI stuff. Because every company basically says,
we do it.
AI. We are such and such and such, slap the AI sticker on the end, right?
Yeah.
Or at the front. Or it's got the little starburst that says AI over here. Yeah, exactly. So what they did find was that, so the normal kind of time frame for contact is the 70%. But what they found is this year is it rolled back to like almost 60%. So 10% earlier.
Okay.
In the average sales cycle, they found that it was like 5 to 7 weeks sooner. Okay. And the reason that was cited most of why customers reached out earlier in the process was because of wanting to understand what AI capabilities that company actually had, because they couldn't really understand. I'm kind of implying that they couldn't really understand what AI capabilities they had just by reading their literature or in other words, like, what do you really do with AI versus what you say you do with AI?
Yeah.
And so that actually caused people to reach out sooner.
Interesting. Very valid
in the process.
Yeah. Very valid question, because those are things that you want to know. And it shows, it kind of reminds me of the study that you and I were looking at a few days ago, where it was talking about how, one of the problems that people are having with AI is they don't understand what it does, or they don't understand how something functions and operates. And I think it's interesting that they're starting to ask for help in that regard, of like, hey, I need to know really what this does, not just talk about it so I can sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I really need to know.
Interesting stuff, right? AI is changing the buying behaviors, but not in the way that we actually are expecting it to change buying behaviors.
Right.
And I'll leave you with, if anybody wants to know how to effectively dissolve 2.5 cups of sugar in a gallon of tea, you need to reach out to Sara, because she obviously has a methodology that would do that. At some point, don't you reach the saturation point where the sugar will no longer dissolve? I feel like 2.5 cups is like basically like, this is the most amount of sugar we could actually get to dissolve in this liquid without it just starting to accumulate on the bottom like the grains of sand on a beach.
Oh.
Like, we're like, okay, this is all the recipe can have in it, because it won't further dissolve after this. It just starts to collect.
He managed to make it dissolve, and maybe that's what the lemon juice is for. Maybe that's what the lemons help, the acidity of the lemons, something in that works with it. But yeah, he made it work. But who is sweet?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to try some of that at some point, and then drink like 4 cups of water to dilute it down in my in my stomach.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We will see you next time on Chicken Fried Growth.
Woohoo.